I'll say with 1:50 left in the game, the Vikings were winning 30-14.
We know.
They didn't lose. They gave that game away. Oh, look, there's a red cow. Must you always get me in trouble?
You've been taking Ambien.
Shirley, Sheila, I need y'all to get her under control. I'll stop this congregation right here, and I'll separate you. We'll proceed, if that's okay with you. Okay. Man, some people. 1 Samuel chapter 21. We're looking at, now we got some smaller chapters so we can cover a chapter at a time. We're about ready to finish 1 Samuel. Just 10 more chapters to go, Miss Van. You subtract 21 from 31, you get 10. 1 Samuel chapter 21. Then David came to Nob, to Ahimelech, the priest. Ahimelech came to meet David, trembling, and said to him, "Why are you alone? And no one is with you." And David said to Ahimelech, the priest, "The king has charged me with a matter and said, 'Let no one know anything about the matter about which I sent you, and with which I have charged you. I have made an appointment with the young men for such and such a place.'" What description? "Now then, what do you have on hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread, or whatever is here." And the priest answered David, I have no common bread on hand, but there is the holy bread. If the young men have kept themselves from women. And David answered the priest and says, Truly women have been kept from us, as is always when we go on expedition. The vessel of the young men are holy even when it's an ordinary journey. How much more today will their vessels be holy? So the priest gave him the holy bread, for there was no bread there but the bread of the presence, which is removed before the Lord and replaced by hot bread on the day it is taken away. Now certain men of the servant of Saul was there that day, detained before the Lord. His name was Doeg, the Edomite, the chief of Saul's herdsmen. And when David said to Ahimelech, "Then have you not a spear or a sword at hand? For I have brought neither my sword nor my weapons with me, because the king's business required haste." And the priest said, "I have the sword of Goliath the Philistine, whom you struck down in the valley of Elah. Behold, it is wrapped in a cloth, hanging behind the ephod. If you will, take that. Take it, for there is none other but that here." And David said, "There is none other like that. Give it to me." And David rose and fled from Saul, and he went to Ahimelech, the king of Gath. And the servants of Ahimelech said to him, "Is this not David, the king of the land? Did they not sing to one another of him in dances? Saul has struck down his thousands." The guy cannot get away from this song, right? I mean, come on. Even in the Philistines, Saul is tormented. Saul has struck down his thousands, and David his tens of thousands. And David took the words to heart and was much afraid of Achish and the king of Gath. So he changed his behavior to pretend to be insane in their hands, and made marks on the doors of the gate, and let his spittle run down his beard. And Achish said to his servant, "Behold, you see the man is mad. Why then have you brought him to me? Do I lack for madmen that you have brought this fellow to behave like a madman in my presence? Shall this fellow come into my house?" All right, what we got going on here? David's on the run. Remember last week you had Jonathan and David come up with this very elaborate scheme to know whether or not David was in danger. And sure enough, Saul was mad, going to kill David, and tried to pin Joshua to the wall, tried to pin Jonathan to the wall with a spear. Right? Pretty clear indicator, Saul is going to kill you. I don't know how you begin this conversation. "Hey, David, I don't know how to tell you this, but my dad's going to try to kill you." Kind of a weird conversation. So David leaves. he arrives at Nob. And it appears that David hasn't thought about his cover story until he arrives. Or his lunch basket. And if you're on the run, I mean, you watch spy movies, right? I mean, Delight, spy movies? No, you're still dealing with the Godfather. No Born Identity, Supremacy, Ultimatum. Seriously? Spy Kids? Maybe? Work with me, Delight. Work with me! James Bond?
Yes.
I'm gonna get her out.
I'm going to take a drink of water because that's the strongest thing I have in this cup.
Now, you say days of your life.
Days of your lives? Passion. Help me out, please. Okay. Anybody else other than Delight seen 007 movie? Okay. A spy movie? The Man from U.N.C.L.E.? In like Flint?
Yes.
Jason Coburn's? Yeah.
Or Bambi. Have you all seen Bambi?
Yeah. I was this tall. And I also have daughters. I've seen it hauntingly again. Don't you have to? There's usually a cover story, right? You know, I'm on the run. Can you help me with an ID and some passports to get safely out of the country? Yeah, man, I'll go get. No, he just takes off. And he shows up. And he comes to the priest at Nob. And he talks to the high priest that's there. And the high priest is concerned and worried. And notice he asks two questions like David needs a keeper. What is it? Why are you alone? And why is there no one with you?
Because no one doesn't throw spears.
Because no one throws. He didn't want somebody stabbing him in the spine. Because the treachery of Saul has been revealed. Ahimelech realizes what's going on. By the way, his name means the king is my brother. That's how his name breaks down. So, anyhow, so there's this play on words within this text. That's just a little rabbit trail. Seen pop up, and we just shot him. Now, David doesn't quite tell the truth here. Notice what David... Huh? That happens a lot. And David isn't punished for this. And so we'll take a look at this here in a minute, because this could get interesting. We'll see how it goes. And David said to Ahimelech, the priest, the king, has charged me with a matter, and said to me, let no one know anything of the matter of which I send you, and with which I have charged you. It's kind of like saying that guy or they. When I was in the Army, there were a handful of people that were going to get the worst beating of their life if I ever caught them. That guy, somebody, they, and others. Because they're the ones causing all the trouble. Somebody said this. Well, tell somebody I'd like to meet him. They are talking about you. Well, tell they where my office is. See, we kind of use that. David shows up and says, hey, the king has sent me on a mission. But notice the details he gives. With which I have charged you, and I have made an appointment with the young men for such and such a place. I need a weapon, some food, because I'm on an urgent mission for the king, because I'm going to see such and such about such and such. I'm not giving you squat, because there's no details in this. Why does David tell this lie? Think about this for a minute. Because he's not being fully honest. Why is David on the run? Self-preservation. The king is going to kill him. A certain amount of fear is going on. Okay? Now, a couple things happen here at Nob that should not happen. One, David fibs. Two, he does something else. Anybody care to guess what it is?
The Holy
He eats the holy bread, and we'll discuss that too. In the Old Testament, we see this. Joshua chapter 2, I looked at it just before I got here. We see Rahab the harlot protecting Joshua and his men, saying, yes, 2 strangers did come to my door, but when it got dark, they went out the gate. But if you chase them quickly enough, you might catch them. Does she get in trouble for that? She gets rewarded for it.
One of Jesus' grandmother says
She is. Now, before we get any further, I am not saying it is okay to lie. That is not what I'm saying. What did I say, Delight? Okay. Got to get that in there.
Bring in reinforcements too.
I get the best sound bites, don't I? What was the last Sunday I had a kid that kept whining and it sounded like he was saying amen? That was awesome. Poor parents didn't know what he were getting signed up for with that kid, but that kid signed them up for everything. David tells this fib. Now, here's the thing, and you look at it and see, why would he do this? Why would he do this? What is the possible reason that he would tell the priest this story?
Well, if he tells him and then the Saul or his men come and say, have you seen David? Then he might spill his guts.
He might. If he comes up and tells them that, because what happens if he tells them what's going on and the priest aids him? They are now what?
The priest has got the Goliath's sword. He could actually...
Well, David takes that. But if David comes up and says, I'm on a run from the king is out to give me food and a sword, and he gives David food and a sword, now what is the priest? He's an accomplice. He's a conspirator. What happens to conspirators and accomplices? They die. What's David doing? He's protecting this man in the priest's life. He thinks it doesn't happen. Saul kills every one of them in 2 Samuel 22. Or sorry, 1 Samuel 22. He's dead by 2 Samuel 22. 1 Samuel 22, he kills them all. The men that are with Saul refuse to do it. David's intent is to protect. Why? Because, sorry. It was the water that Delight made me drink. That Delight butts, I tell you what. He's doing this just like Rahab does, just like you see in other situations in the Old Testament, by which to preserve life. The intent here is not deception for the sake of deception, but deception for preservation. You see this work out today, and you go back to World War II in the hiding place. Do you have any Jews here? No. Because you know what's going to happen. Nazis will take the Jews, take your family, and you will all go to the concentration camp. This is an interesting story in church history. In church history, back when the argument between Athanasius and Pelagius were the rage at the Council of Nicaea, what happens is, and when people say, well, you know, Constantine says this theology, they really don't read much of the Council of Nicaea. Both Athanasius and Pelagius were excommunicated repeatedly. And it went back and forth between the two. Well, Athanasius has been excommunicated. He's on the run. I believe he's on the Nile. And he's headed down the river, and his pursuers are behind them. And the pursuers do not recognize him in the boat ahead of him. And they yell, "Have you seen this man?" And his response is, "Yes, he's in the boat in front of you." So they pass him by, assuming that Athanasius is on up the river somewhere. Did he lie? Well, yeah, he did, because he didn't go, "Yeah, hey, it's me." But he did, and he did tell him who was in there. So you have this going on. And so a lot of people will take this and go, "Well, see, I can lie. I can lie." Well, let me ask you, what is the reason why you would lie? Is it the preservation of life because you know that Ahimelech is going to die? You know that the Jews in the closet are going to die. You know that the 2 spies are going to die. Or do you concoct a cover story? I mean, you would be the worst spy in the world if you came up instead of going, yeah, my cover story is, I'm an American spy. I'm here to spy on your nuclear reactors and take all your stuff. That only happens when the dude can't be killed by anybody, you know, in those movies that get kind of far-fetched. Terminator. They're cool movies. You ought to watch them tonight. You haven't seen a Terminator movie?
I'll try to get out the movie.
Do you know there's a store called H-E-B up the road? Okay. Blockbuster's out of business now. Yeah, they've been replaced by Netflix. So yeah, he concocts this story, and he tells it to the priest. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that he's trying to, I think that he's trying to protect the priest and keep the priest from becoming a conspirator. Secondly, if you do not tell the priest what your business is, when you leave, can the priest tell Saul where you're going? Can he say, well, how many men you have? Well, he can tell you how many men you have with him and what you took from there. But can he give any other details than he said he was going to such and such a place to meet such and such people? No. David is fleeing to the Philistines. David is headed to the area of the Philistines. David is headed to the city of Gath. And instead of going, yeah, I'm running from Saul. I'm heading to the city of Gath. I wanted his sword just in case I run into Saul, so I need to kill him. And I need some food. Can you help a brother out? So for 2 reasons, I believe. 1 is to preserve the priest. Doesn't work. 2 is to keep the priest from being able to give information on where he's headed. Why? He's alone, being pursued by the king. Anybody have a different opinion? I mean, it's just my opinion. I think it works, but it's just my opinion. Anybody else?
Sounds pretty legit.
Sounds legit. I hear another siren coming. I didn't say a thing. I don't know you people. With the candlestick in the library. Now then, what do you have on hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread, whatever there is. And the priest answers, says, I have no common bread, but the holy bread. Is there bread there?
Yes.
Yes. Is the bread got special requirements on it? Is the bread? I went to public school. Does the bread have special requirements on it? Yes. Now, let's take a look here. Let's keep going. If a young man has kept himself from a woman, and David answered, the priest says, truly, women have been kept from me, from us always. When we go on expedition, this vessel of the young men are holy. Even on an ordinary journey, how much more today will their vessels be holy? Now here's the thing. There's no stipulation about this over the holy bread. The only people that could eat the holy bread were who? The priest. You don't see the stipulation. Now you can go back, I think it's in Exodus 25 and Leviticus 14, where there's a statement about touching things or eating things that were consecrated, and this may be what the priest is referencing. But the holy bread, the showbread, was designated for the priests. David, are you clean? Yes, I'm clean. I haven't had an issue, and I haven't had sex with a woman today or within the last 24 hours, because that was the requirement. So we're good. And any men that were traveling with me on the expedition, we would follow this order. Okay, great. Yippee.
But he had nobody with him.
That's what the text says, but then he says us. But I still say he's alone, because it's a maybe he's sticking to his cover story.
He has an entire war party out somewhere.
No, he doesn't. He's alone. He's alone. Because you only see in chapter 22 is when he begins his band of following brothers. It's also in chapter 22 where Saul kills everybody. So he eats the bread, takes it and eats it. Now, one of the things about this is you have this interesting phraseology here. to be replaced by hot bread on the day it's taken away. The bread that's served before the Lord is made and placed there, and it's hot. And that bread that was there is taken away, and it's for the priest to consume. It still doesn't help David out, does it? He's stuck. What does Jesus say, though, in Matthew chapter 12?
It's all okay when you did it.
That's right. Jesus says it was fine. Why? Well, let's read Matthew chapter 12, verse 1 through 8. Give us some good insight on this. What does Jesus say about this? Matthew chapter 12. At the time, Jesus went through the grain fields on the Sabbath. By the way, this really upsets people that are really tied to the Hebrew roots movement, because you take that verse and this verse, and it really upsets them. His disciples were hungry, and they began to pluck heads of grains and to eat it. But the Pharisees saw them and said, "Look, your disciples are doing what is not lawful to do on the Sabbath." Can you imagine what they see us do, going to Luby's or today I went to where did we go? Chili's. Those people would be spun up. Anyhow, that was just a free one. Look at your disciples. They're doing what is not lawful to do on the Sabbath. And he said to them, "Have you not read what David did?" Because here's the thing. What good Jew is going to condemn King David?
Saul.
Well, in that day. In Jesus' day, what good Jew is going to go, "Yeah, that David guy, man, he really mucked it up for everybody. He just messed everything up." None's going to do that. Why? Because David is the quintessential king. He's the guy that Messiah is going to get measured against. And he's also the king that every other king is measured against. That's like saying that Moses guy. Gee whiz. They wouldn't talk about him the way some of us talk about the current guy we have in the White House.
Well, he wasn't like that.
Well, he wasn't like the guy in the White House, but still, you know.
Nobody else is either.
He said to them, "Have you not read what David did when he was hungry? And those were with him?" See, now the text here says that those that were with him. Didn't say that in the text there. "How he entered the house of God, and he ate the bread of the presence, which was not lawful for him to eat, nor was there those there with him, but only for the priest. Or have you not read the law on how the Sabbath priests in the temple profaned the Sabbath and are guiltless? I tell you, some things greater than the temple is here. If you had known what this meant, 'I desire mercy, not sacrifice,' you would not have condemned the guiltless, for the Son of Man is the Lord of the Sabbath." What is he saying? There are certain things that are higher than law: the preservation of life, the ensuring that people have the ability to be protected. David did what was necessary to survive. There was no bread. David would not have made the journey without it. There was a higher calling than that over a ceremonial law. And the priest acted rightly, just like the disciples acted rightly by plucking grains and taking it and eating it. They were not working on the Sabbath. They were doing what was necessary
To survive.
to survive. Do you think the Jews didn't fight on the Sabbath?
Well, it didn't in the what was the war between
6-day war?
wars?
6-day,
The Maccabean.
The Maccabean. Yeah, that's true.
They passed the deal because a bunch of them wouldn't fight them and they got slaughtered.
Huh? You could win a great day. You could beat the Israelites every day if you decide to fight them on a Saturday. So you have this conflict that goes on here. He eats the bread. And notice the text doesn't condemn him for the lie he tells, nor for the eating of the bread. Never happens. Jesus looks and says, "Did the right thing." And so did the priest. What's your problem? And he says, if you had understood this, you would understand what I'm saying now in the New Testament. So let's drive on. Have I eaten raw wheat? I've eaten a lot of things raw, but not wheat.
It It's not like eating cheesecake.
Yeah.
So this, I mean, they might have been wrong if they'd been eating cheesecake. They weren't eating cheesecake.
No, they were eating very coarse bread. Yeah. It's not like he took the sacrifice of a bloody animal off the pulpit and was smacking on that gone down the road. Have you tried the goat? Man, the goat is fantastic. You got to eat the goat. Here, eat some of the goat on that falafel there. You'll be fantastic. Yeah, no, it wasn't that. Now, there was a certain man of the servants of Saul that were there and detained before the Lord, and his name was Doeg, the Edomite. This guy has another role to play later on, we will see. Chief of Saul's herdmen. Is this guy a good guy or a bad guy? We don't know. Not yet. The text hasn't told us. It's just like when I watch a movie with my wife and she goes, who's this guy? Have you and I not been sitting in the chair together? I don't know who he is. Although last night I called the show and I was bored all the way through it, right to the end, right? I ruin shows for people and then I gloat when I'm right. That's just how I play. So anyhow, so David said to Ahimelech, or to Ahimelech, however you want to pronounce it, then have you no spear or sword at hand? I'm on a message for the king. It's urgent business. But I happen to forget now, listen to what all he's asking for. I have happened to forget my wallet, my food, and darn it, I forgot to grab my sword on the way out. Now you see why the guy is kind of puzzled when David rolls up, and he rolls up without weaponry and by himself. Why are you here alone and unarmed? That would be perplexing, right? For I have brought neither sword nor my weapons, because the king's business required haste. Well, there was a bit of urgency in his leaving.
It was a life or death.
It was a life or death struggle. Again, he keeps on with this cover story that the king's business is of great urgency, and I had to leave so fast, I left my weapons. See, the king is after me. Now, this is true. He has left without his weapons. If you're Ahimelech, or Ahimelech, or Ahimelech, however you want to look at it, do you start wondering if the story is a little on the fishy side? And this sounds to me like some of the stories I had when I was a chaplain. No joke, sir. There I was. I was on an urgent business from the colonel, and then I wrecked the car. And well, why'd you wreck? Well, I stopped at the class 6 on urgent business. Yes, sir. And okay. And then it just spirals down. What sword is there? Goliath's sword. Now, David's a little bit older now. He probably could possibly wield it. It'd be like watching me wield one of those large, huge claymores that the Scots like to wrestle with. It'd probably be that way. Yeah, I could sling it around a little bit. Probably get people hurt really easily that don't intend to. Probably a sword for me is something like that. Maybe not a lightsaber. Have you ever wondered why they don't cut themselves up with their own lightsaber? Have you ever seen those movies yet, Delight, either? We're going to have a movie night on a Sunday night, and we're going to make Delight watch them all. I'm teasing. No, not. It works out, doesn't it? You know I tease because I don't care.
Not afraid.
Anyhow, he has this huge sword. He says, well, I'll take that. Why? Any weapon is better than, especially when you're on the run. Yeah, I'll take a Derringer over nothing any day of the week. I prefer my AR and my 45, but hey, in this situation, beggars can't be choosers. Give me something, I'll make it work. Like MacGyver in the Old Testament. Do you see MacGyver delight? A breakthrough. Yeah, well, he looks like he's 100 years now. He got over into some drugs and things like that. So it's like Jan Michael Vincent that ended up homeless and poor. So, but I digress. There's none like that. Give it to me. Now notice, he flees. Where does he go to? Well, I mean, after he's at the church and he leaves, where does he take refuge? Gath. Gath is one of the cities of the Philistines. They're a 5-kingdom city-state. We talked about seven: Ekron, Eglon, Gath, and then there's 2 more that they don't play any real major role. Gath is where who comes from? Goliath. And it had a lot of giants. It had his brothers. And he shows up on a doorstep. And this is great. No, it's not. He gets there. David rose and fled from Saul and went to Achish, the king of Gath. And the servants of Achish said to him, "Is this not David the king?" Now you got a problem here. They seem to think he's the king before he's announced. A couple of issues with this is people think that this is something where they're belittling him. Oh, look, here comes one of the kings of Israel. Could be they think that he is looking more like they are. They're set up like a 5-kingdom city-state where you have a king over each city, and then they all go to war together, and David is just simply one of them, or they're mocking him as a sub-ruler. We don't... And he's got that really big sword, which doesn't endear him well to probably Goliath's brothers. That's like in a Western, when you come riding into town on the bad guy's horse and his buddies are in the saloon having a beer and you roll up wearing his guns and the horse. You know somebody's getting shot in the street in about 10 minutes. Not that I watch a lot of Westerns, but I watch a lot of Westerns. You watch Westerns, Delight? Occasionally. John Wayne? No.
That's Miss Bonnie. Miss Bonnie. You know Van's here today, and you're supposed to pick on
Miss Van, how come you haven't showed her any movies?
No, my job, Mom.
I'll pray for your soul.
They like decided to go to the movies when they make a trip.
That made it.
Oy vey. Oh, anyhow. But notice what happens. The reason why they think that they're mocking him is the fact of the song that they start singing again. Okay? Your popularity is so great that your enemy knows the ditty that sends you on your merry way. What do they begin to say? Is this not the guy? And here's another possibility, too, that he would eventually supplant Saul because of his great prowess in military conquest. Is this not the guy of which it says Saul has struck down his thousands, but David his tens of thousands? Now, David's got a problem, does he not? So what does David resort to again to save his skin? A lie!
But he's good at it.
But he must be great at it.
This requires some acting, too.
Well, I did get out of detention one time. More than one time. Several times. For yarns I've spun to get out of them. But that's okay. You know, that was a long time ago. I've since repented of those. What does David do? Well, how does David get out of his situation, his sticky situation he's in? He acts like a madman. What does the king say? You've brought me another village idiot. Does my kingdom need another village idiot? Does it need another madman? If David were sane, David is going into prison and David is going to die. He will be killed by the Philistines because David has a reputation of killing what?
Philistines.
Not just Philistines, but Philistines from where? From Gath. Chief among which is a man whose spear is bigger than a weaver's beam, whose sword he just happens to be packing as a safety precaution.
I'll just bring it back to you.
Hey, that sword looks familiar. Where'd I get it? Oh, I got it off your giant when I threw a rock and smacked him between the eyes. I whipped out the sword and lopped off his head and held it up so you guys could know that my God's bigger than your God's. I'm sure that's great at parties, not so much here. So David resorts to being mad. Crazy. And the king allows him to stay. And the king allows him to stay and not throw him in jail, and David can come and go as he wants, right?
No. Do I lack mad men?
That's right. But notice if you go down 22, it says David depart from there and escaped to the caves of Endolim. So he does escape from there, but he does seek refuge from the king of Gath for a while. Now later on, does he not seek the patronage of the king of Gath? He fights for the king of Gath except for against the Israelites. Why? Now look at the character between these two. Does David lie? How many times? Twice so far. Has David eaten something he should not eat? Yes. But wait a second. Does Saul do something he's not supposed to do? Does Saul lie? What's the difference between these two?
David is God's appointed.
That's one. What about this? Intent. When Saul breaks God's commands, what is the intent of Saul's heart when breaking them? He is doing it for his own selfish means. The intent of Saul's heart is one, notice what he says. You didn't show up at the appointed time, and I what? I compelled myself. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to do it. But you're not being here compelled me to do it. Why? Because the army was afraid, and I was afraid, and so I did what I needed to do to keep the army on my side. I killed everybody except the king and all the choice animals because I what? I feared the people. I'm not going to kill Saul. I'm not going to kill David. I love David like a dear brother. Next verse. Then I tried to pin David to the wall with a spear, not once but twice. My targeting acquisition radar is clearly off. What's the intent of David's heart? When David tells Ahimelech the lie, is he trying to preserve Ahimelech or draw him into the situation? Trying to preserve the man. When he eats of the showbread, is he eating because there's no other food there, or because he says, you know what, I've always wanted to taste what showbread's like. There's nothing there. There's no animal, there's no meat, there's no food. All there is the consecrated bread, and he takes that. When he goes and preserves himself in Gath, again, he's protecting his life. If you look at the two men, while yeah, they both do things that are wrong, when it boils down, look at the intent of the heart. Most lies are usually revolved around intent. There's an attempt of deception of an illicit gain. Now, again, it is not okay to lie.
Right.
Okay. But let's just say tomorrow all left-handed people were outlawed and be turned into extermination. I would be hiding at least one in my house automatically.
You.
No, Kimmy. I'm ambidextrous. Kimmy's left-handed. And I would be teaching her how to be ambidextrous. Why? Is that a law that I should follow? No. Let's say I was in Nazi Germany, and I just believe God to be faithful, and I'll just tell the Nazis, hey, not only do I have a Jew in my house, I have like 20 of them. They're up in the attic. Their names go from David Goldstein to Joseph Feinstein. There are people that do that stuff. And that's something that they have to make a decision on with themselves. But notice in this situation for the preservation of the life, you see this with I have a block on her name again. Joshua chapter 2. Rahab. Knew it would come to me there in a minute. And there's several other passages in the Old Testament where you have this phenomenon. The intent is never designed to turn people over to the authorities unjustly for them to be killed, but for the preservation of life. Now, that doesn't mean that you can lie to preserve preservation of life. I think that's something you take very slowly and very carefully and very prayerfully. But the intent of David's crimes against a holy God is slightly different than the intent of Saul's crimes against a holy God, is it not? And we will see when David makes a crime against God with an absolutely ugly intent, when he steals another man's wife, has the man murdered, and then tries to cover it up, what ends up happening to David? The baby dies. We see the intent of David's heart when he does something that God tells him not to do, and he numbers the army, and then what happens? They have a disease. We see the intent of David's heart when he ends up having 4 sons taken from him because of the sin he has with David and Bathsheba. We see that when he crosses over and begins to behave like Saul, the consequences of David's actions. We don't see this here. Now, again, this puts us in a bit of a moral quandary at times, and then you ask yourself, well, when is it right for me to lie? I would say there's probably never right for people to lie unless you're put in a situation like Anne Frank in the hiding place. If I was put in that position, I would probably hide Jews and tell the Nazis to pack sand.
Where you separate the letter of the law from the spirit.
From the intent of the law. And that's what Jesus does when we looked at Matthew 12. What does Jesus say? And have you not heard of David? Oh, yeah, that guy. Yeah, we've heard of him. What did David do? He ate of the bread that he wasn't supposed to eat it. Why? Because he would have died if he hadn't eaten of the bread. What's your problem?
The common Jews about that stuff.
I think this priest does. Because he doesn't hesitate. It's not even like, well, his only question was, are you clean? Not, is your help me out here, David. Help me out. Is there anybody in your family that's a priest? Your mama married to a priest? Sister, cousin, are a priest? Somebody in your line that's a priest? Yeah, okay, you're a priest, you're good. You don't see any of that moral equivocation. It's, are you clean? Are you spiritually capable of partaking of these things? Yes. Okay, here's the bread. And off he goes. Unfortunately, though, it doesn't save these men. So we see next week Saul in his rage will kill them all, except for one. I think it's one. It's Abiathar. Yeah, I think he's the guy that survives. We'll finish this out here and continue on. Not really kind of a sermon series, more kind of like a mini Bible study, I guess, to say. Questions before we close out?
Was when they talked about the showbread, is that the showbread that was on the table for the Ark of the Covenant?
In this case, probably not for the ark here, because the ark, remember, has come back to a different place. And actually, did the ark come back to Nob? Let me take a look here before I say that. I do not see where the ark is in Nob from chapter 6 and chapter 7. It is in Kithram Jearim, because the men there were killed. So the ark is not at Nob. But they would still present the showbread and put it there on the altar.
As good a soldier as David was, because you consider him a warrior.
Yep.
Do you think that? I don't think that he had a malice toward Saul.
No, if he had malice towards Saul, he would have done so.
He killed Goliath. He could have killed Saul.
And not only that, we will see as we continue on, repeatedly, he was put in a position to kill the man.
In the cave.
In the cave when he was sleeping, in the cave when he was relieving himself. His robe. Cut off his robe. Saul's robe was getting shorter and shorter every time they had their little engagements.
You would have thought he would have.
Yeah, you would have figured that when you go into the cave for your business, you would take a detail with you, since you have a problem not knowing when someone's cutting your robe off.
Or leave it at the door.
Yeah, I guess, I guess there's some things that are still private. But anyhow, he had opportunity after opportunity to kill the man. He had justification after justification to kill the man. I have committed no crime. Remember, that was the thing he said to Jonathan last week. What did Jonathan say to his dad about David? This man has committed no crime against you. You are waging an unjust war against a man who does not deserve it. And we will see just the absolute malice of Saul's heart next week. This verse kind of bridges the gap in the transition from David being in Saul's house to David being on the run. And we kind of see how that story begins to play out, and we then get to see the interplay. And then David goes off and serves the Philistines, and then there's a war again, and Saul is killed. Questions? No? Let's close out in a word of prayer. Gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day, and we thank you for the study we have here with David and Saul and the interplay. And just at times, Lord, the ethical questions that are addressed in the text that we struggle with. And answers that we have to come away with. A lot of people use passages like these for justifications to justify all kinds of things and all sorts of behavior. And yet, when we look at it, these passages are limited and targeted and specific. They're not licensed. They're not open season. We thank you for the lessons that we're learning and the tragic lessons we learn from those who just simply cannot get past jealousy, rivalry, anger, and strife. But the lessons we learn from those who are long-suffering, forgiving, and follow after you. Both men are laid before us in these texts. Both men are for us to examine, and both men are for us to learn. We ask for your blessing upon us. In your name we pray. Amen. All right.